The final of the Rugby World Cup is just around the corner. The All Blacks taking on the Springboks, and what will decide who gets himself a fourth Rugby World Cup title, one more than the other side. But for this video, we are going to be trying to predict the starting lineup and reserves for the All Blacks. We have already done that Springboks team, so be sure to check that video out as well. But it is myself, and it is Rugby Itch. Massive win for the All Blacks in their semi-final. Momentum firmly in their favour, but can they do it up against the Springboks?
Yeah, look, it's always going to be a tough battle when these two sides face off. I mean, going off the semifinals, I definitely would say the All Blacks are in a better position going into this game. You know, I think they're definitely seen as the favorite, you know, if you're asking most fans going into this one. But, hey, at the end of the day, you know, if there's one team I think the All Blacks definitely wouldn't want to go against, it's the Boks. You know, that's the history between these two sides. It's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, kind of rivalry within rugby. So yeah, to have it in the final once more, I mean, it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome.
And of course, those games between the All Blacks and Springboks, normally 50-50s in terms of what way they can go. Yeah. To have it as a World Cup final, of course, be very entertaining. But we will start with your front row. Who do you believe the selectors will be going with for the All Blacks in those first three positions?
Yeah, so I've kept it very simple here. I've gone with the exact same three that I went with last time. I've gone with Ethan de Groot at number 1, Cody Taylor number 2, and Tyrell Lomax at number 3. I just think these three alone you have to go with, particularly that prop combination. You know, we've seen now de Groot and Lomax just being, you know, they've been very influential since they've come back together as a partnership rather than just having one off the field and one on. So, yeah, I just think that you have to have these two no matter what. I mean, they just add a different level of, I guess, stability in terms of that scrum. And yeah, they're just great players to have overall on your team. And yeah, Cody Taylor has been, he's definitely, I think, been under the radar in terms of how well he's actually played so far in this World Cup. So yeah, you have to have him, I guess, over, you know, Tuklaho as well as Dan Coles. So yeah, pretty happy with that front row.
And I'm the exact same. Ethan de Groot making 15 tackles in their last contest up against Argentina. One of the quiet workhorses, I guess you could say, of that front row from the semi-final. Cody Taylor, his line-out consistency, something that the All Blacks will definitely need to use up against the Springboks. And then number 3, Tyrell Lomax. Like you mentioned, that combination of de Groot and Lomax looking extremely strong. They also both got subbed off in the 56 minutes, so that tells us they should still have plenty left in the gas tank for this Rugby World Cup final. But now we look at the locks. For myself, I have made the change at number 4 back to Brodie Retallick. Now, for that game up against Argentina, the All Blacks actually opting to go with Sam Whitelock, and I feel like that is a change that they could possibly look to make again, mainly because he did completely nothing wrong when he was in the starting lineup. Retallick looking good off the bench when given that opportunity, so either way they're going to be stacked for choice, but I did go with Brodie Retallick as that starting option. Number 5, I did go with Scott Barrett in this contest. Now, he did give away that yellow card later on in the game, although you'd have to say in a different game scenario, he wouldn't have been doing that. Mainly, he just wanted a spell, didn't he? 10 minutes off, have a little bit more left in the tank for next week. Yeah, a quick little break in front of his dad, Smiley Barrett, as well. He probably enjoyed watching him make that little bit of a play in the breakdown. But yeah, Scott Barrett, number 5, been consistently good throughout the Rugby World Cup for the ABs. So that's who I've gone with as that number 5.
Yes, I've actually gone the exact same pair as you there. You know, I've also gone the likes of Brodie Retallick as well as Scott Barrett. I think that combination alone is center and really vital towards what the All Blacks are able to do, and particularly from those lineouts. But again, I would not be surprised if Whitelock maybe is starting in this game because, you know, this is his final game for the All Blacks. You know, this is, you know, he can go out on a high here. And it wouldn't be surprising, you know, if the All Blacks actually reverted to go with Whitelock at the number 4. They go with maybe what Retallick. Well, maybe you go with what Retallick at number 4. Like, who normally plays when Retallick and Whitelock play? It's normally Whitelock number 4, or is it?
Normally you'd see Whitelock 5 if those.
That's what. Yeah, I was gonna say maybe he shifts down. So yeah, it's Retallick number 4, Whitelock number 5, and then what they could do is put Scott Barrett as number 6. But of course, that would mean that you have Shannon Brazil, who would have to sacrifice in that position. But sorry,
someone just throw a brick at your house because
my dog just came in.
Scott Barrett to number 6 is not something I expected to hear at this stage of the Rugby World Cup competition.
I don't think they'll do it, of course, but if they really wanted to have Sam Whitelock, you know, start, I think that's really the best way to do it. But in all honesty, I do think they'll just go with Retallick and Barrett as the kind of combination for those locks. So yeah, I would not be surprised if yeah, they just kind of stick with the same thing.
Alrighty, so now looking at that loose forward trio. Now, you haven't got Barrett as an option at number 6, of course, seeing as he is in their locking duo. So I would assume we're both thinking along the same lines here of a pretty similar loose forward trio that the ABs have gone with consistently throughout their Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's one of those where I think so far we've pretty much had the exact same. We're going to continue that with Rizal number 6, Kane number 7, and Odyssey at number 8. I just think you can't change, I guess, that three. Again, like I said, out of the three, Rizal, in my opinion, is the more changeable. I'd say out of the three if you wanted to, but it's just I don't see it happening going into this final. I mean, you got to stick with your guys really, and yeah, I mean, them three alone have been really good throughout this tournament, particularly without the knockout stages. And yeah, we've seen kind of Odyssey go to another level, as well as Sam Kane doing exceptionally well so far, and Rizal obviously getting a few tries. What we saw obviously in the previous game, got 2 tries for himself. So yeah, I mean, all three of them are just making an impact, and that's exactly what I want to see in terms of that loose forward trio. So yeah, I think they got to do the exact same.
And matching up with the Springboks, you know it's going to be a physical game.
Yes.
When it comes to the breakdown, whether that is going to be Sia Khaleesi, maybe Dwayne Vermeulen in the starting side, still a little bit unconfirmed about whether or not he will be starting, but Peter Steph Toy more than likely the 7 that the Boks will look to use. Going ahead there with Sam Kane, who currently is in some brilliant form. I feel like he's playing some of his best rugby, and he's chosen the perfect time to start playing that rugby because these are important games for the All Blacks. Of course, Ian Foster's last game as coach. Will he be able to walk out on a high? Even getting second in the World Cup, I'll be honest, is much more than a lot of people anticipated from Ian Foster and his coaching team heading into this Cup. So they've got nothing to lose. They want to go out there. They want to play fast-paced game of rugby. Shannon Frizzell making 17 tackles in the last contest. He keeps his spot as my number 6, like you mentioned, also scoring 2 tries against Los Pumas. Sam Kane, number 7, and Adi Savia, number 8. 19 tackles from that man, alongside 8 defenders beaten. So he's been on fire throughout this World Cup, and he'll certainly be hoping to do just that up against the Springboks here as well. But now moving on to the backline. Number 9, Aaron Smith, and number 10, Richie Mo'unga. I feel like it would be a very hard decision for the All Blacks to make a change there now, after how long they have stuck with that same combo of Smith and Mo'unga. The more likely to be switched. I mean, everyone still wants to see Cam Roigard get some chance. I don't see it being in a World Cup final, though, that you would chuck him in the deep end. Although saying that, who knows what Ian Foster is thinking at times. So maybe that's exactly what he's going to do. Try and throw the Springboks off their game by sticking a whole new halfback in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, again, I do think out of the two, I think Aaron Smith has to play because, this is also his final game for the All Blacks. So it's one of those where, I've also gone with Smith and Morgan. I mean, that's just, you got to go with them too. But, again, both of them have been great throughout the Super World Cup. So, there's no really point in changing them too, I think, out of those two positions. I mean, I think they have been the best 9-10 combination we've seen throughout this tournament. So it's, just don't change it. Don't change it if it's not broken. So, no, you got to go with that.
Well, now we move on to the centres. And if that same statement reigns true, that means you won't have any changes here.
Yep, it continues. I've gone with Jordie Barrett at the number 12 and Redgo number 13. Again, look, this team it's one of those where there's not going to be a lot of changes I see that, the All Blacks will have to make. I mean, it's really only the 2 key positions, which we've kind of discussed one already, which is the locking, I guess, choice, as well as, one of the winger spots, which we'll get into very shortly. But, in terms of the centers, you've got to go with Jordie Barrett and Redgo. I mean, Jordie has just been great throughout this tournament, and Redgo, I think, has done, how can I say this, where Jordie Barrett is at I'd probably say a 9 out of 10, I'd say, throughout this World Cup. Redgo's probably had around a 7 out of 10. So still very good, but it's just, he can obviously go up another level just like that. So, you got to go with them too, though.
And I did. Number 12, Jordie Barrett, making 17 tackles throughout that last contest. There were a lot of tackles that needed to be made by the All Blacks. Definitely in those early stages, but they were able to keep that pressure on in defence, not allow the Pumas to bust their way through. Rieko Ioane, number 13. He's still going to be a very evidential member of that All Blacks backline, I would say, when he marks up more than likely with Jesse Kriel, although there are rumours it could be Kanan Moody, could be Lukanyawam, who makes his way back into the side for the final. But either way, Rieko Ioane needs to use his pace to his advantage. He's got a ton of it. He's got Geordie Barrett on the inside who's playing some brilliant crash ball, going head-to-head maybe with Damien Dialendi. It's going to be an absolutely awesome one in that midfield combo, and I just hope that both sides get to use those centres in the final matchup. And now we move on to the back three. I'll be honest, this left wing spot is probably the only position that you can really change across this whole back line, and it's that question mark, is it Mark Telea or is it Lester Fainanuku? They've both played a very...
Caleb Clark.
Oh, yes, of course. We cannot forget Caleb Clark. The man has been waiting patiently. Some forgot he was in the squad, but he's ready to go if needed. But I'm not picking him. Number 11, I'm going with Mark Telea, which is a big call from myself because normally I go with Fainanuku in this type of scenario. But I think from that last game of Mark Telea up against the Box, I see him working very nicely stylistically up against Kurtley Aronsa. So he had 101 metres carried in the last contest, 11 carries over the gain line. Those are crucial metres that the All Blacks will be getting for themselves. And then also 14 defenders beaten.
Yeah, that's
that
big
kind of number makes
it
very easy to select him in this scenario. And I'll be honest, if Lester Fainanuku got that spot, I think he'd do just as good of a job up against the Springboks. So it's really just that 50-50 of what way the All Blacks do want to go. Then for the right wing, I feel like there's very limited debate about who gets this spot. Of course, you could go Will Jordan or you could go Caleb Clark. But in this case, I'm going to go with the man who's got a hat trick to his name for this Rugby World Cup, also tied with the leading try scorer of any World Cup competition. So I am going to go with Will Jordan, getting himself the hat trick. Could have been 4 if that last pass had found his hands, but he's just so good at getting into space, creating opportunities for the All Blacks, which could be crucial in such a close game. That's the thing. It's hard to predict, but I feel like we're going to see a game go down to the wire, and it's going to be those little moments from key players that will determine who walks away with the victory. Number 15, Beauden Barrett. At the moment, I feel like he's pretty much secured himself that spot. In fact, that would be the other spot in this backline that could be debated. Maybe they give Damian McKenzie that chance. It's just for a final. It seems like it's too little too late to now make those changes. So I believe Beauden Barrett, with the way that he's able to chip and chase, it might be effective up against the Springboks. I will mention due to the wet conditions, although something the All Blacks won't want to do is continuously kick that ball back to the box, because or else then that will play more in the favour of South Africa. But for yourself, did you go with your Blues boy at number 11, or did you give it to Fainanuku for this final?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is really a tough choice to go choosing between both of them. There's not really any wrong answer here, in my opinion.
No.
I think both of them just add a ton of just value towards that kind of back line. But personally, I've decided to go with Mark Telea in this position. I just think that stat alone, which you mentioned earlier, when 14 defenders beat in, you don't get that. I just don't think you get that from Leicester. And I think within a final, you need someone to kind of suck the defense out within one side to allow openings within the other. And I think Mark Telea does that. He can just create that space with ease. And, we saw that actually with one of the tries, I think it was for Vizel, when he got his first try in the game, where Mark Telea kind of just beat, 6 defenders at probably at one point, and just a little pass from Aaron Smith towards Vizel in the corner, just pretty much an open try. So, yeah, if he can just do that a lot more often in this game, then, yeah, the All Blacks could get a lot more tries in this game. So, yeah, it scares me from a ball point of view, but no, it's Mark Telea, so I think you've got to go with him there, number 11. And then I've gone with the exact same two as you in terms of the other spots, with Will Jordan number 14 and Beauden Barrett at number 15. So like you said, just those two, you got to stick with them. Both of them had very impressive Rugby World Cups, so just keep it consistent, and they'll do the job.
Because the other factor with Mark Telea is he's very deceptive, isn't he? Because you think you've made a tackle on him. Argentina thought they had made it 3 times in a row. Yes. And he just slithers out of the challenge, keeps running. They were probably very lucky to stop him short of the line so that Frizzell was the one who scored. But Mark Telea, if the All Blacks go with a kicking game, if we see a few more up and unders, I think that will benefit Fainanuku. Would you be in agreement
I agree.
there?
In terms of the high ball, Leicester's definitely, I think, a better player in the air in terms of getting it compared to Mark Telea. But again, it's like you said, when you're going against the Box, it's one of those where, do you kick it high in the air to what the English did to kind of challenge them once more, or do you kind of hold on to possession? Because in the past, what we've seen is actually when the way the All Blacks have been able to beat Safka is just by holding on to possession and just powering through them and just continuously going for those phases and obviously getting the try at the end of the day. So that's the way I think the All Blacks will kind of play out this game. They won't try to give much of the possession towards the box. And again, like you said, it's the conditions as well that could have a factor in it. But I really just think the All Blacks will just hold on to possession. So for that reason alone, I think Martley is probably the better choice, number 11, compared to Leicester.
Alrighty, so now we move on to the benches. Of course, we assume that the Springboks, they will have either that 5-3 or 6-2. The All Blacks, I think it's pretty certain that they'll be going with that 5-3 for this matchup. So for yourself, front row replacements, who have you gone with?
Yeah, so in terms of my front row replacements, I've gone with Samisoni Takalaho as the hooker for me. Again, this is one you could actually debate because they actually have gone with Dan Coles here in times where I actually didn't think they would go for him. But it's one of those where I just think Takalaho I feel like he deserves it just because throughout the rugby championships in the past, I've seen he's actually really stepped up actually in the recent years, and I feel like you have to reward him. But at the same time, this is also another member of this kind of All Black squad, which would be their last game. So I wouldn't be surprised actually if they did go with Dan Coles in this, because again, I'm not saying it's going to happen. This is kind of thinking into the future, but Takalaho may have another chance to kind of start in the finals. So maybe you do give it to Dan Coles in this situation, but no, I'm going to stick with Takalaho because that's the guy I selected originally. But I've also gone with Ofting Fasi as well as Tamati Williams. So I've gone with them too. I think this is probably the two I went with last time. I think they actually went with Fletcher Newell, if I'm not mistaken, for the Argentina game, but I think they may revert back towards Ofting Fasi for this one. So what about you?
Well, for myself, I did make that change at Dane Coles. At number 16, I feel like that little bit of extra experience near the end of a contest could be absolutely crucial for the All Blacks here. Definitely because more than likely for the Springboks, we will be seeing maybe Dion Fleury, one of those guys who is very good at getting into the breakdown. Cole's going to have to use his knowledge, try and help him out there to keep up those quick South African forwards. Number 17, I did go with Tamati Williams, similar to what they did go with in that last game up against Argentina. And then number 18, Fletcher Newell. So even though we did see quite a bit of Ofa Tuangafasi as well as Nepo Lolala earlier on in the Rugby World Cup, I see now that they are starting to make that switch to those two Crusaders props. And then, like you mentioned, 16, definitely the debating spot out of that front row. But now moving on to the rest of the replacement forwards. Number 19, Sam Whitelock. If he's not in the starting lineup, he will be somewhere. Definitely after that late turnover, he was able to get up against the Irish. And then number 20, I have gone with Dalton Papali'i, which does mean no Ethan Blackadder, which I mean, it's a little bit unfortunate for Blackadder. I feel like he could be actually quite handy in this game up against the Springboks, but Dalton Papali'i, he'll probably be that straight replacement for Sam Cane. They might also look at a little bit of a reshuffle perhaps later on in the contest. Could come on maybe for Shannon Brazil, but for now, I think Papali'i, he should be a safe bet for the ABs to go with at number 20.
Yeah, no, I'll keep it simple here. I've gone with the exact same two as you. I've gone with Whitelock at number 19 and Dalton Papali'i at number 20. So, like you said, those two I think that they've made a good impact off the bench throughout the recent games, and I think they can do it once more. So, that's the two I've selected as well.
Well, that now leaves us with the 3 back replacements. Now, number 21, we have struggled with throughout this Rugby World Cup playoff finals games, mainly because they have gone with Finlay Christie consistently. Now the question mark remains, is this the game that we see Cam Royard?
It is probably the biggest question we have, actually. In all honesty, this is probably the hardest, well, not really the hardest one, but probably the most unpredictable choice we have. That we don't know what the All Blacks are going to go with here, because I think we both want Royard to come off the bench here, but they haven't gone with him. So it's like you feel I've been obligated here, and I've actually gone with Finlay Christie as the choice. I just feel like they're going to do it. And again, you have to remember, guys, we're thinking in the mind of Ian Foster here. So no matter what, we're going to have 3 Barretts in. And, I mean, it seems like we're going to have Christie in here as well. So I have gone with Christie. I mean, to be fair, I've actually always enjoyed watching Christie. But again, the question is, will he get minutes in the game? That's the real question. Yeah. I've gone with Christie. And, in terms of the other players, I've gone with the likes of Damien McKenzie as kind of like the backup kind of 10/15. And then, Anton Brown. So, I just think you go to Antonio Brown. He's been great off the bench and really just made an impact from a defensive point of view, but also just being able to kind of putting out the quick ball as well. So yeah, that's my final three there.
Alrighty, so for me at number 21, I have gone with Cam Roigard. Now, I honestly do feel like they'll go with Finlay Christie, but I wouldn't have been able to forgive myself if they finally did go with Roigard and I didn't have him in my lineup for the Rugby World Cup final. Number 22, I have gone with Damian McKenzie. I feel like he is a very good option for the ABs, definitely off that bench to be able to add that little bit of extra X factor, depending on who he comes onto the field for in this final. And number 23, just like yourself, Anton Leonard-Brown. Seems like the safe option, has been doing extremely well. The other thing with Cam Roigard, though, is we've got to remember in that record defeat that the All Blacks suffered, he was the shining light. He was the man who got himself the try off the bench. So maybe that is just that little bit of an edge that he gets throughout this final. But nonetheless, we do thank you all very much for tuning in to this lineup prediction. Do let us know who you believe the selectors will be going with for the All Blacks in this lineup for the Rugby World Cup final. But be sure to check out Rugby Itch and the Rugby Recap. Both links will be in the description down below. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and we will see you all for the next one.